Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation today on the siege of Constantinople in the year 626. The siege is also known as the Avar-Persian siege of Constantinople. Now, this siege was a key factor during the Sassanid Byzantine War from 602 to 628, which saw Constantinople fall and then rise. And in the background, you can see a depiction of both the siege of Constantinople and the siege of a Persian fort by someone we're going to learn about later. And now the prelude to how we got to like this siege, the Sassanid Byzantine War, was in the year 602 in the northern part of the Byzantine Empire. Their forces had just claimed a great victory over the Slavic tribes, and the soldiers were getting ready to go back home. It was the winter time, but they then got a letter from Emperor Maurice stating that we think it'd be better if you guys stayed there up north and during winter and continue the campaign because he believed during this time, Byzantium was in an economic crisis, like some sorts. So Maurice thought it was cheaper and easier. So when the soldiers found out with this, they were irate. They were not happy. Like, we just fought our butts off just for you to say, hey, we can't come back to the place we're defending. So an officer by the name of Phocas, he rallied the troops and they would storm the capital of Constantinople. And when they got there, they would take control of the palace and everything. They would eventually capture Maurice and his sons, and Phocas in front of Maurice would execute all the sons and then execute himself. Then Phocas, since there was no royal heirs, would claim the throne for himself. And if you ask historians who studied Byzantium history, Phocas would become one of the worst emperors in the entire empire history. He was a tyrant who abused his powers, and if he had any threat to him, he'd have you executed. His reign is a lot like Stalin's reign post World War II, where if you were any sort of threat to him, he'd just have you taken off things. But thanks to his reigns, the empire would break into chaos and start to fall apart. Everything was going wrong. The Visigoths, the Slavs, they would start raiding from up north, and there was nothing they could do because it was all chaos. The army was under his set. But to the east of the Byzantium was the Sassanid Persian Empire, who was ruled by the Emperor Khosrow II. He saw this as an opportunity because the Emperor Maurice, he helped Khusro get back into power. He helped him claim the throne, and they were like buddies. They were able to finally end the Persian Byzantine conflict between one another and had a stable time of peace. So when he saw that his friend had died, he was irate and was vowed to get revenge for his friend's killer. Now, the Byzantine Sassanid War. Now, what originally started as an attempt of revenge, Khusro also saw as an opportunity like, hey, I can now use this as an excuse to start claiming lands that we might have lost from years past. So it's like, hey, I'm gonna say it's revenge, all that stuff. And at the early parts, Focus, as I said earlier, was disastrous. He got manhandled by Khusro and all the assassins. It was a bloody battle after battle that Byzantine was losing and losing and losing and losing. It wouldn't be until 622 during the Byzantine Sassanid War where the winds of fate would finally favor the Byzantines because everything was going wrong at this point. They needed a hero. They need someone to bring them out of the mud. And you can see on the left, on the bottom left, is a picture of the Byzantine Empire and assassins. They were right next to each other, and they were able to have. And this was in 600. They were able to have peace until Phocas. And above, as a painting of a battle during this war. But who would be this hero for the Byzantium? It'd be none other than Heraclius, born in 575 in Cappadocia, which is in the region in modern day Turkey. He was born to Heraclius the Elder, but he during like the reign of Focus, he was down in he was in Carthage, and he saw how this man was ruling this once great empire. The Romans, everyone knew what the Romans was, and this man was tarnishing the legacy. So he gathered an army and sailed him. He saw himself. He's like, I am by fate, I'm the man that saves this empire. When he finally lands, he gets to Constantinople and is just shocked by how bad it has become. People starving, man, all the nobles like Focus, just using their power. But when he gets there, he Focus after time. Focus is brought and handed to him, and who brings him to him is none other than the High Guard that is run by Focus's brother, which showcases how much they hated this man Focus. But when he saw this, Heraclius asked him, "Is this how you rule? Is this like what you come to the emperor?" To which Focus replied, "Do you think you could do any better than what I could do?" To which it angered Heraclius and saw him decapitate Phocas and begin his reign. Early on, when he became emperor, he was coined in 610. He was actually a general. He was like the first general in a while to actually fight on the front lines of with the Byzantine army. They got handled. Once again, early stages, they could do nothing. Even it was so bad that he sat at his throne and wondered, would it be better if I just gave everything to the Sassanid Empire and became a vassal state to the Persians? He was so distraught, like he didn't know what to do. But he then got a letter from Khusro II stating, like, look what's happened. Like, look at all the stuff that you failed to do. Look at all the land you guys lost. This taunting, which made it worse. He actually was planning on moving the capital of Byzantium to Carthage and was getting ready to leave until the patriarch of the Constantinople stopped him, brought him to a church and talked about the stories of Justinian, Belisarius, Constantine. Like, these people fought and died for the empire. Why don't you be like them? If we have to go out, why don't we go out in the blaze of glory? Which gave him a newfound energy to like, I have to fight for my empire. And now the people, they all agreed. The church, like noblemen, the peasants, they all came together. They were melting down stuff. They were getting ready to like, we need to fight this war. We're not going to be lose this empire, standing on our own feet. We're going to go out on our own terms. So as the time went on, he was winning battles. He was finally, as I said, in 622, the winds of fate finally turned towards the Byzantines. They were winning battles, crushing defeats. And I forgot to mention this earlier. The Sassanids, they took Damascus and Jerusalem, holy cities, became such big parts in the Crusades later on. But during this thing, in Jerusalem, the Sassanids would actually burn the Holy Temple and steal the true cross, which just brutalized the morale of the Byzantine people. We just lost this holy wreck, all this stuff. It's like, what? How could it get any worse? So on his turn revenge back, he would actually come across a fire temple of Zoroastrianism and burn it down, seen as a sign of like, hey, you burn down our temple, we'll burn down yours. We are coming for you. And everything was going away. But as he was going on, a force of Sassanids would sneak behind him and they would start to besiege Constantinople. And he stood there. He goes, what do I do? I've gained all this land and I can just lose it already and go back and save my city, or I can continue my siege. He then had the realization after praying to God, like, if we truly are the city of God, then God will have to defend us and help me protect it. And he continued his campaign. Now, another factor is Sharbaraz. He was born as Farukan, but gained the title of Sharbaraz, born empire. Not much is known about Sharbaraz, other than he was the most trusted general of Khusro II. And during this early stage of the war, he would score victory after victory after victory. But even though he was constantly defeating him, he decided to go down to the Egyptian peninsula and go after the lands of Egypt. What he wanted to do was he started conquering, going down the Nile because he wanted to cut off the food supplies of the Byzantium. He thought, if I be able to do this, it makes life easier for us. But after this, and when he finally came to meet Heraclius, he got beat again and again, and it was like, he's like, what do I do now? But despite getting defeated, he was able to sneak his army towards Constantinople and had his sights focused. I was going to take this city, this bustling city, the capital of the new Roman Empire. And he was able to get help from neighbors from north of the Constantinople. So the beginning of the siege, Sharbaraz with his army would unite the Slavs and Avars to attack Constantinople. This united force would number 80,000 troops to only the 12,000 professionally trained units remaining in the capital of Constantinople. Now, this is a very big difference in numbers. Seasons, they are brutal. But what makes Constantinople, which I consider to be like one of the greatest defensive cities in all of history, due to many factors, such as the walls, as you can see on the left, that's the restored walls of Constantinople, because they still stand today, because they were such great things. You had the original Constantine walls when the city was switched on, and then later on, during the reign of Theodosius, the Theodosian walls, which were like a double slit layer, that were super impenetrable. And they would survive siege after siege after siege, which helps Constantinople stay in its power, how Byzantine was able to keep its power and keep like flourishing trade, plus like economy. It took until the invention of gunpowder and the Ottoman bombards to finally break down the walls. And even then, they still had a bit of trouble to take down these walls. And what's also helped Constantinople was that when forts, like very heavy line forts like Constantinople, are on like near water, like close to bays, it's also really hard because you also have to blockade or they can still get supplies in. So as you see in the bottom left, you have these straits, such as the Sea of Marmara, the Golden Horn, and Bosphorus, the Bosphorus Straits, which were very big key factors in this siege, because Constantinople was able to control these lands, which allowed them to not allow this Persians and the Slavs like combined with this stuff. Now the siege that would decide this was the big factor of the battle. Whoever won this would probably become the winner of the Byzantine Assassins' War. So on June 29th, 626, the first attack on the walls would begin. The besiegers attacked from the north of the Avars and the Slavs. They would use their troops and they would have siege towers, these large wooden structures that were at the same height as walls, but they would catch fire. But the Persians, who were better, like more equipped to siege and go actually experts, they weren't able to connect with the allies, as I said, with the Bosphorus Strait, the Golden Horn. They weren't able to connect because if they tried to cross the water, the Byzantine galleys would just crush their ships. So they wouldn't allow them to combine their forces. So it made it harder for the besiegers. So they keep attacking, and it would fail and fail and fail and fail again. These failed attacks would keep boosting morale in the Romans because every time, like, we keep repelling your forces, you're not even getting close to these walls. And what also helped was that during this time, the Patriarch Constantine, Patriarch Sergius I, he'd walk around the city and have these icons of the Virgin Mary and the child, such as the one pictured there. Though it's debate like which exact one he had, it doesn't matter. Everyone knows that he carried on the Virgin, and it boosted the morale. Like this is this divine city. We are protected by God's light. That if he still calls it, we will still stand today and stand tomorrow. As I said, since the Sassanids couldn't get together with the allies, these attacks were just pointless. They were just throwing their bodies at the wall, just letting men die for no reason. Because you couldn't, these walls were thick, like really hard to penetrate. And since they couldn't claim and coordinate their attacks, it made it so much easier for the defenders. And on August 7th, 626, about like a month after the first attack, the both forces would retreat and Constantinople would reign supreme. And this boosted the morale of the people. And when news got out of this, the morale of the Byzantines, they were super high. They had repelled his forces. God had their back. They were going to win this fight. But at this time, since his many defeats and Kusa was growing weary of Sharbaraz, and after this failed siege, he was just done for it. So what's the best thing to do when you're losing, like everything's going wrong? Blame others. Don't blame yourself. So what he did was he ordered a bounty. He wanted Sharbaraz put to death. But when this letter was about to be sent to him, Heraclius actually intercepted it and added names of officers in his army. So when Sharbaraz actually got this letter, they said, I want all these guys dead. And it was his army and him. So they said, no, if you don't want to respect us, this is how you treat us for all the stuff we've done for you. We're done fighting for you. So Kusa, once again, this is like everything was going wrong. And this would eventually lead to his usurpation where he'd be assassinated. And later on, Sharbaraz would actually become the Shah of the Sassanid Empire, though it wouldn't last long. As I said, this would sow the seeds at the end of the Sassanid dynasty because your armies are just depleted. This mega force of the Byzantine units are just coming to your city, just walking through it, and you're all in the civil war. Everything that went wrong, that could go wrong for Sassanids, would do. But since the Sassanids would fall, it was now a new up for grab power in this Middle East, all this stuff. And this would lead to the rise of a certain someone named the Prophet Muhammad, which would then shape history even more. And that would be it for my presentation. Thank you. I hope you learned something about the siege today. This is actually learning about Heraclius was actually really cool. Like this guy's like a very underrated emperor when learning about all the stuff. But it was very fun to learn about this, and I hope you all have a great day. Oh, shit.